Should these guys rule over Westeros? Quick answer is yes. Want to hear the reasons why you agree with me? Rhaenyra is the main character, so naturally we're going to root for her, but she does have the best arguments for the throne in the show. Reason number one being is that her moral character is better than anyone else on the Greens. It's bad enough being a drunken rapist, but it's even worse to advocate for a drunken rapist to have absolute power, and you could apply this to everyone else on the Green side. While Rhaenyra does have her faults, she's still not on the same level as Aegon, and yes, she lies about her kids and kills an innocent man to fake Laenor's death. That isn't as bad as rape and pointlessly leaving your bastard kid in a fighting pit. At least Rhaenyra's bad actions have a purpose behind it, and you can even argue that they're necessary evils that spawn some form of good. For instance, if she didn't lie about her kids being bastards, I can see that Jace, Luke, and Joffrey's lives would be way worse. And in the case of the innocent man Daemon and Rhae killed, at least they gave Laenor the life that he wanted. When Aegon does bad things, they only benefit Aegon, and they hold no other purpose, which makes his actions even less understandable and worse. Giving a man like that any chance for power would be a bad idea. He wasn't even king yet, and he was still shown abusing it. Aegon was raised by Alicent to be an heir to the throne and treated as such, which probably contributed to him being spoiled. Compare that to Rhae, who was never really raised to be an heir, and some of her behavior seems to be better because of it, at least when you compare it to Aegon. You would think that Alicent would give Aegon some form of political training, but it's obvious that Aegon doesn't have any, which puts him and Rhaenyra pretty much in the same boat when it comes to that aspect. This does show off Alicent's parenting skills though. Look how Alicent's kids come out compared to Rhaenyra's. We'll get deeper into that in a moment. It would also be good to mention who would be empowered by extension of Aegon ruling. People like Jace, Luke, Corlys, rhaenys, and Daemon even are much better people than Alicent, Otto, Aegon, and Daemon. Imagine what could happen if the Greens won the throne. Guys like Sir Christian could do pretty much whatever they want, and this would be fairly problematic. The problem is once you advocate for one person on the Greens, you advocate for the rest of them, and it's pretty hard to say that there would be less problems if they did rule. The most chaotic person on Team Black is Daemon, obviously, and even he has calmed down a lot since the start of the season. He's still crazy, but you get the point. This is pretty important since these characters will either be in power somewhere or will gain power by their respective side ruling, so let's compare them. Alright, well, let's compare the two worst people on each list. This is probably going to be between Daemon and Sir Christian. I covered Daemon in my first video, but he essentially kills his wife, some peasant dudes along with dismembering them, this random dude so he can marry Rhaenyra, and he almost fucks his niece to get back at his brother. Sir Christian currently has only killed Joffrey and Lord Beesbury. While you could argue that Sir Christian's worse as of now, or at the very least, extremely unhinged, Daemon has just more of a track record of doing bad things even though he's calmed down a bit, so I'll give it to Sir Christian. Now let's compare Rhaenyra's kids to Alicent's. This is obviously no contest, by the way. Joffrey, Luke, and Jace are presented as the most wholesome characters in the show, and they seem like the most normal people. Compare that to Aegon and Aemon, who would most likely be in jail if you put them into the real world, and we obviously have our winners. Luke isn't power hungry at all, and he constantly humbles himself, and Jace actually prepares to be king, unlike a certain somebody. While Aemon is a hard worker and knows his stuff, the fact that he was so irresponsible that he would chase his nephew on Vhagar is beyond me. This pretty much put him in villain territory for a lot of people. Aegon didn't seem all that bad at first. He just seemed like a weirdo at worst who didn't have his priorities straight, but then he raped someone, and that's pretty much how you know that the show doesn't really want you to like this guy anymore if you ever did in the first place. This one's going to the Blacks. Joffrey essentially is too young to even have a personality yet, and Alicent's third kid, who will be revealed in season 2, Daemon, obviously hasn't been shown. And oh yeah, somehow I forgot Helena. Yeah, she's fine. Weird, obviously, but she doesn't do anything wrong. But this isn't really enough to offset the actions of Aegon and Aemon. Next is Corlys and rhaenys versus Otto. While yes, I can agree at the very least he's deceitful, obviously. Even worse than that is the fact that he was more than willing to kill a whole family, children included, to end the conflict that he engineered in the first place. And on top of that, there really isn't any indication that he wants what's best for the realm. While yes, he may say in some instances, I highly doubt that the greater good was his reasoning for having Alicent marry Viserys and creating this overall greater conflict between the two families. It's more likely he just wanted his kids to be on the throne, and now he's doing some pretty questionable things to achieve that. Now, Corlys and rhaenys aren't that bad at all. The most questionable thing rhaenys did or didn't do was burn the Greens alive. This one action could have ended the war right there, but I'm not gonna act like this is as bad as creating the war in the first place. And Corlys is pretty chill. He doesn't really do anything problematic, at least relative to the other people in the show. I mean, he even helps liberate the Stepstones and allows Luke to to be Lord of Driftmark, which is pretty nice of him. So another win for the Blacks. So the last round is between Rhaenyra and Alicent. To be completely honest with you, I'm not sure which one is worse really. When it comes to my real opinion, not just an argument, I find it kind of hard to compare them. For instance, most of Alicent's actions are because she's brainwashed essentially. She genuinely believes that Rhaenyra will kill her children because that's what Otto told her, and the men manipulating her life seemingly have warped her beliefs. One of the reasons as to why Alicent hates Rhae is because she thinks she has no sense of duty. Rhae has flings with multiple other men, and that doesn't fit into Alicent's idea of duty, so she resents her for it and treats her like a degenerate. Mind you that the only reason Alicent thinks this way is because Otto and Viserys have obviously instilled the idea that being loyal to one man is a woman's only purpose in life, and also that it's the right thing to do no matter what the circumstances. So it's no surprise when she hates Rhaenyra or is resentful to her when these imaginary rules in her head are broken. Not to mention that Alicent also is likely subscribing to the idea that only a man can rule anyway, which she is likely getting from Otto and her lifelong servitude of men. But while I can see where Alicent's coming from and her thought process, this doesn't make her actions okay or less consequential. In the end, she should be able to check her biases since she's a grown woman and she still helps lead Westeros into war. And while Rhaenyra obviously isn't a saint, she doesn't start conflict. While yes, she definitely could have made some better decisions to avoid said conflict, it's still not her fault. A lot of Rhaenyra's motivations can be boiled down to she just wants her birthright, which isn't inherently bad. The only criticism I have is that she's setting her kids up for a succession crisis, because Jace is a bastard and her other kids by Daemon aren't bastards and have more Targaryen blood. But this isn't guaranteed to start a war, at least not as much as Otto and Alicent crowning Aegon behind Rhaenyra's back. So I'm going to give it to her. So unsurprisingly, the Blacks would have morally better people in power, which would likely lead to better outcomes. But do you know what else could lead to better outcomes? Today's spawns? Yeah, I'm showing this video doesn't have one, except for myself. So it'd be appreciated if you liked and subscribed. If you like this type of content, I would definitely be making more in the future. So back to the video. As I was saying, the Blacks have better people, so therefore better outcomes. Pretty simple, right? But there's another factor that I really haven't talked much about in my other videos. A big problem for the Greens is that one of their main arguments is that Rhaenyra is a woman. And while it feels icky to hear a character use that as their justification, you might at first think that makes a little bit of sense, at least in this world. You wouldn't want war so a woman can't be in power. It would just cause too much conflict. This justification for things feels wrong for a reason, and it signifies the Greens' overall moral character. While yes, they're correct in the idea that having a woman rule would be controversial and possibly violent, this goes against our intuitions about what's right versus wrong. If you lived in the 1960s, would you say that's wrong to protest for civil rights because it could create division and violence? We would oppose anyone who would use that justification because we know oppression, at least on the basis of race, sex, and gender, to be worse than short-term violence or opposition. Yes, generally violence is bad, but if you need violence or division to overcome some form of oppression, it's usually seen as okay, at least in the short term, because the benefits of having breakthroughs and rights for the different types of people is usually more beneficial. Maybe the people of Westeros might revolt in war because she's a woman, but the breakthrough for women would outweigh the bad in this scenario most likely. Besides, we shouldn't accommodate for racist or sexist beliefs anyway. We shouldn't not allow a group of people to do something just because a different group of people will get upset about it because of that person's sex. If you're sexist, then that's on you, not the other person. And I feel like that's one of the main reasons why the Greens are framed in this negative light in the show, which is obviously for good reason. It just doesn't feel right to root for them even if you can't put your finger on it. If you like this video, then you'll definitely like my other ones. I've referenced these older videos a lot, so if you want the full scope of this one, I would suggest watching those as well. I publish roughly around once a week, so I'll definitely be taking some suggestions about reviews or breakdowns. Alright, see ya.